And you're watching Al Jazeera. I'm taking you to a meeting of the leaders of the European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council holding their first joint summit in Brussels. This is Charles Michel. He is co-chair of the event. He is the president of the European Council. It is also being chaired by the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Thani, because Qatar holds the rotating presidency of the GCC. Let's listen in.
For your personal commitment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with this summit, we would like to send a powerful message to our citizens and to the world. The EU and the Gulf Cooperation Council, we are ready to build a strategic partnership fit for the 21st century. And we are ready to work together to tackle global challenges. We want more stability, more security, we want more prosperity and more respect for international law. I recently had the occasion to meet many of you to prepare this summit, and we all agree that this summit should send a message of unity and a message of hope. We share a common goal to promote growth and to generate more prosperity for our citizens, and we can do this through sustainable investment and trade, and by working together on the two biggest transitions of our time. On the one hand, the digital and artificial intelligence revolution, and on the other hand, the green transformation of our economies. We are also aware of the importance of better connecting our regions, our economies, and our people. And we also share a common responsibility to protect the rules-based international order and the UN Charter. As regional organizations, we also have a key role to play in conflict resolution, addressing climate change, strengthening multilateralism and human rights. The current geopolitical context, we all know, is extremely difficult, and it requires a lot of courage and clarity. I'm absolutely convinced that we, in Europe and the Gulf, we share a genuine wish to work much more together and to build bridges. Together, we can do more to promote stability, progress and solidarity in our regions and across the world. Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, today global stability is once again under threat by the dramatic situation in the Middle East, by Russia's war against Ukraine and by the tragic situation in Sudan. These crises have caused enormous human suffering, so we must act more decisively and again change the course of history. Excellencies, the future of our two regions is strongly connected. Today, we have the occasion to discuss where we can do more to build a positive agenda for the future that leads to more concrete benefits for our citizens and develops a roadmap for our future cooperation. Finally, I would like to thank the negotiation teams on both sides for their tireless work on the joint statement. I would like to say thank you. I look forward to a successful summit, and it's my pleasure to pass the floor to His Royal Highness Tamim. You have the floor, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب الفخامة والسمو، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أود في البداية أن أحييكم وأن أشكر كل من معالي السيد جاسم البديوي الأمين العام لمجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية وسعادة السيد شارل ميشيل رئيس المجلس الأوروبي على جهودهم الحثيثة.
Charles Michel, Chairman of the European Council, for having and holding this summit. This Gulf European Summit comes under the chairmanship of the State of Qatar, a member of the GCC. This summit is the culmination of a lot of efforts during the last years, and it is a reflection of the keenness of both parties to have more consultations between each other collectively. This also will enhance and boost the channels of contacts between our both parties, the Gulf Party and the European Party. The GCC and the European countries are quite interested
والتوافق على مبادئ مثل احترام القانون الدولي وتوطيد السلم والأمن الدوليين واحترام سيادة الدول وعدم التدخل في شؤونها الداخلية وتحقيق الرخاء للجميع. ونثمن هنا اعتماد الاتحاد الأوروبي للوثيقة المشتركة للشراكة الاستراتيجية مع دول الخليج في عام 2022 وتعيين ممثل خاص لمنطقة الخليج.
In 2022 as well, when we appointed a special coordinator for the relationship between the EU and the GCC, and we are keen to promote all our fields of cooperation, be it regional or international. We are keen on investing on international trade, on exchange of expertise, on innovation, on combating climate change, on protecting the environment, and on promoting the economy. Our EU-GCC partnership is very promising. We reached and exceeded $204 billion in 2022, representing approximately 13% of GCC's total trade in goods. The value of GCC's export to the EU reached $106.3 or $177 billion in 2022, and direct investments from the EU in the GCC has increased extensively from 2017, reaching $233 billion in 2022. And of course, we need to reinforce this cooperation and to put in place, if needed, new ways to increase this cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know how security and political challenges are big, especially in the Middle East and in the framework of, in the aftermath of the war in the Middle East, in Gaza and Ukraine, and in other places in the world. It is therefore very important to promote the relationship between the GCC and the EU. We hope that this would contribute to promote the principles of justice and international legitimacy, far from any double standards, which undermine collective security, upon which the whole international community has agreed as the basis for peace and security in the world. We would like in this context to thank the EU for their efforts in preserving peace and security in the world, and all their efforts in order to find peaceful solutions to the current crisis, and in order to promote international economy and all growth efforts in all parts of the world. The issues facing the Middle East are very important to the EU, and the same goes for your issues in our region. We are interdependent geographically, economically, and culturally. The destructive war that was waged by Israel until today on Palestine and on Lebanon, which made war crimes as something normal, is something that we cannot accept. We need a settlement for these conflicts. We need to find solution to the Palestinian cause on the basis of the international legitimacy, on the basis of the borders of 1967, and we need to establish a sovereign and independent Palestinian state side by side with the Israeli state. We call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon, And also, we call upon Israel to withdraw their forces from the West Bank. And we would like here to thank the EU and the US for their efforts to bring about ceasefire. In Qatar, we believe that ceasefire would be the first step before a serious round of dialogue and negotiations in order to make possible for a definitive solution to the Palestinian cause in accordance with the Arab Peace Initiative and international legitimacy. It is important also to note the seriousness of crimes perpetrated by Israel against civilians. And we call for the EU to play a major role in order to bring together the whole world for the two-state solution. This has to be done in an irreversible way in order to make possible a sovereign and independent Palestinian state on the basis of the 1967 borders. We here would like to thank all those countries that recognized the Palestinian statehood, and we call upon all the others to follow suit. We also condemn the war that kills civilians in Lebanon and all those attacks perpetrated against the UNIFIL forces. It is a flagrant violation of the international law, and we call upon all belligerents to cease fire immediately and to implement Resolution 1701 of the United Nations Security Council. As far as the Ukraine-Russia war is concerned, the GCC position is based on international law principles and the Charter of the United Nations, which preserves the sovereignty of states, their territorial integrity, and the non-interference in internal affairs of states. The GCC supports all brokers that try to find a peaceful settlement to this conflict. Now, talking about illegal migration, we would like to increase our cooperation in combating illegal migration. And we need to increase also our cooperation in combating major natural disasters, but also human-made disasters like genocide, poverty, and other conflicts. We hope that this first summit will be the first step to consolidate our historic ties between the GCC and the EU, to promote more relationships to come on the political, economic, and cultural sides. I'd like to thank you all and all those who took part in preparing this summit. We would like to bring about peace for everyone, and may the peace of God be upon you all. Thank you.
I would like to thank you, Your Highness. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Please, you have the floor.
Your Royal Highness, Your Highnesses, fellow leaders, Your Excellencies, a very heartfelt welcome to Brussels. Your presence today here and our first meeting in this format is absolutely historic. We are breaking new grounds by seeing each other as strategic partners. And to be strategic partners means to listen to each other, to respect each other, and to trust each other. It also means to empower each other, to rely upon one another, and to join forces for crafting a shared future. We want a partnership that is positive, wide-ranging, and a partnership that delivers. Our regions are complex, and it is only through dialogue and engagement that we can deliver. As you rightly said, Your Highness, the security and prosperity of the European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council have become indispensable for each other. Let me touch upon 3 points. We cannot implement our economic ambitions without security. Russia's war against Ukraine and the Hamas-led terrorist attacks against Israel on October 7th have fundamentally undermined regional security in Europe and the Gulf. We need to do all in our power and mobilize all our diplomatic skills to stop the extremely dangerous escalation, with now Iran launching a massive ballistic attack against Israel or Houthis attacking our ships and disrupting freedom of navigation. We need immediate ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon. We need protection of innocent civilians, humanitarian access, and the release of all hostages. Only diplomacy can generate a sustainable pathway for security. And the European Union is committed to peace building rooted in a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. Here in Europe, the impacts of Russia's unprovoked war on Ukraine are felt strongly. It is a war against the sovereignty of an independent and peaceful country. And I know how sensitive you are to the idea of sovereignty, and I'm confident that we can work together and rely on you to stop this illegal Russian war. It is a war against universal values, against the right of a sovereign country and its absolute freedom to decide alone on its future. My second point. We cannot implement our ambitions for sustainable growth without securing essential resources. As COP28 has proven last year, we are committed partners in the green transition, and Gulf economies like ours are making big strides in energy diversification. We both need critical raw materials to advance clean technologies, and with your support, we can meet these demands responsibly. And this is where our partnership can have great impact. Europe is equipped to bring cutting-edge sustainable technology to mining and refining operations in your region, so together we can develop the industries of tomorrow and build the local skills needed to sustain this transformation. And my third point, energy partnerships can be the foundation for a bold new era. The Gulf is beginning a significant energy transformation, and I firmly believe that the energy advantages of this region extend to renewables, clean hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And we observe that clean energy projects by companies from the Gulf are becoming more and more visible within the region and beyond. And this is the moment to work together to develop new value chains and markets for clean energy. By investing in interconnections and infrastructure, your region could become a clean energy hub, connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. And that's why we are joining forces in ambitious projects like IMEC, the first ever economic corridor, connecting India, Middle East, and Europe. Your Royal Highness, Your Highnesses, President Macron and Prime Minister Maloney, with you, Your Royal Highness, we launched, together with others, the MOU last September in India for IMEC. And trade and investments are the backbone of our relationship, and our economic ties are growing. We need to build more strategic connections, be it on trade, energy, of course, innovation and technology, for example, AI, and critically, people-to-people contacts. This is the reason for our ambition to extend the network of European chambers of commerce in the region, like the one recently opened in Saudi Arabia. Our economies and societies are going through deep technological transformation and value-based change to face and shape them together. We need to synchronize our actions, and that's what we're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, today's summit comes at a critical moment. Conflicts around us demand urgent responses. We all know how hard it is to overcome the bitterness of war, but it can be done. To choose growth over conflict, to replace war with cooperation, and to turn hostility into opportunities. That's why Europe will always be a consistent partner for peace and economic progress. And I thank you, and I'm looking forward to our conversations.
You're watching Al Jazeera's 1421 GMT. We've been bringing you coverage of the joint EU-GCC meeting that's being held in Brussels at the moment. It's by leaders of the European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council. It's the first joint summit to be held in Brussels. And as we were hearing, the crisis in the Middle East was playing a large role in the opening remarks there. We just heard from the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who was talking about the benefits of the two sides, the EU and the GCC, working together. She did call out the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th and the Russian attacks on Ukraine as having undermined security in both Europe and the Middle East. I'm paraphrasing what she was saying there. She said we need immediate ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon. That was something that had been mentioned previously by Charles Michel, the President of the European Council, who made the initial remarks. But we also heard from Qatar's Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Thani. He is there as in his role as holding the rotating presidency of the Gulf Cooperation Council. He spent a significant part of his speech referring to the crisis and the wars within the Middle East. He said the destructive actions by Israel and Palestine and now Lebanon have resulted in war crimes, and it's something we cannot accept. Again, I'm paraphrasing. He said we need to establish an independent Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state. I want to bring in Hashem Ahelbarra, who's live for us in Brussels, and he's been listening to what has been going on. Hashem, I just gave a kind of broad outline of what we were hearing. It certainly seemed as though to set the tone for the meeting going forward, and it certainly also seemed that the two key elements, alongside everything else they're going to be talking about, are of course the situation in the Middle East and the crisis in Ukraine.
Rob, when this summit was scheduled, announced months ago, the general consensus was basically it was going to be about trade, technology, security, and peace and stability, and the common ground between the Europeans and the Gulf nations. But things have changed with the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and the geopolitical landscape and the concerns for huge transformations have trigger this debate among the European Union to call the GCC leaders to come here to Brussels and negotiate a path forward. And this is why the emphasis today is going to be solely about the need to find a way to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza and also in Lebanon. But when you listen to the Europeans and when you listen to the Gulf leaders, you get a sense of how long this is going to take them to come to an agreement. The Europeans believe that there needs to be a ceasefire in Gaza simultaneously with one in Lebanon, and that after the ceasefire, the key players in the GCC will use that leverage to try to negotiate longer settlements that could be conducive ultimately to the two-state solution. And this explains the presence of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. 2002 was the date when the Saudis launched the Arab Initiative, which calls for all the Arab nations to recognize Israel in exchange for Israelis accepting an independent, viable Palestinian state, a same statement reiterated by the Emir of Qatar. But then when you listen to what the Emir of Qatar has been saying, very critical of what he described as international inaction and the double standard and the need for the international community to get its act together, put more pressure on the Israelis, and also ask the Israelis to pull out their troops from Lebanon and also stop the relentless bombardment of Gaza, and then go for a ceasefire. Now, on Gaza, Qataris are extremely important along with the Egyptians. It's through them that we're going to get a sense of whether there's going to be a ceasefire or not in the upcoming weeks. When it comes to Lebanon, the Saudis will have a huge influence. But it's interesting to note, Rob, that the Emiratis, one of the key players in the Gulf nation, in the Gulf organization, have sent a low-level delegation to this gathering. That would give you a sense of disagreements over how to tackle the issue of Gaza and Lebanon on one hand, but also disagreements over how to deal with the Russian. But this is an extremely delicate moment for both the Europeans, for the GCC. What are we likely to expect in the upcoming days and weeks? The Saudis are going, we've been told by different sources, to play significant role in shaping the outcome of the agreements to be announced once there is a ceasefire. They will use that leverage to convince this Palestinian Authority to move forward, and particularly the key rivals in Lebanon to elect a new president, because there is a belief here in Brussels that there is absolutely no way at this particular moment to convince the Israelis to stop war in Lebanon unless a president is elected. That's a guarantee for the Americans, the Europeans, and the Israelis that the next Lebanese president is going to have a say over the army as per the constitution, ask the army to deploy south, and then ask Hezbollah to move north of the Litani River. They don't want to see any presence of Hezbollah south of the Litani River. Then the elements for a ceasefire would be there. Now, is this something that could be done anytime soon? We have to wait and see. But when you hear the Emir of Qatar and that message about the need to bring about not only a ceasefire but a lasting solution, just gives you a sense of how this is becoming an urgent thing for the international community. Rob, this is the concern. They do understand that if this continues, it could further degenerate into a wider confrontation that could draw the Iranians into a vicious cycle of tit for tat with the Israelis. That could be the moment where the international community would have zero leverage to contain the situation. And this explains why the general consensus today is we need to have ceasefire immediately in Gaza and also a ceasefire immediately in Lebanon.
Hashem, I was looking at a line that was being reported by the Reuters news agency just in the last few hours. It's quoting Egypt's foreign minister. Now, should stress, of course, Egypt is not part of the GCC, but the foreign minister was saying that European division over the situation in Gaza and Lebanon sends the, quote, wrong messages to Israel and to Arab countries. It's the reason I bring that up. It's worth remembering, of course, that although we're talking about the GCC meeting the EU is not necessarily speaking with one voice. There is, as you were describing, there's going to be an awful lot of discussion and negotiation inside rooms, one would imagine, in order to try to get some sort of cohesion towards an understanding of where to move forward.
Rob, the EU has been struggling to put on a united front when it comes to how to move forward in Gaza and Lebanon. But there are issues that they have to overcome. Today, the Irish Prime Minister, Simon Harris, said that it's our duty today to speak with one united voice and say that we need to protect the UNIFIL forces because our troops are represented in that force. And two, he said that I came here and this is going to be my message to the Europeans and to the GCC leaders, and particularly to the Europeans. It's appropriate for the EU to review its agreements with the Israelis and ask the Israelis to put an end to the escalation in both Gaza and Lebanon. But is this something that the Europeans are willing to take in the upcoming days or weeks? It remains to be. It will definitely take some time because the decision-making process here is very long and is done on the basis of a unanimous vote. Now, the EU understands that it does not really have huge leverage when it comes to the very details of the complex political landscape when it comes to the Middle East. I'll just give you an idea about what they're hoping to achieve. So this is the way they're thinking. They say that if we bring the Saudis along with the Qataris, and we do understand how extremely important they are, The moment we have a ceasefire, the Qataris, as a key broker, along with the Egyptians, will convince Hamas to go ahead with that ceasefire. Then we will have to invite the Palestinian Authority to come along and negotiate whatever agreement between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Potentially, the Palestinian Authority is going to take over Gaza. Then we will call for broader discussion about two-state solution. The Saudis announced in September at the United Nations General Assembly meeting that they launched this global alliance for the two-state solution. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said that Saudi Arabia is not going to recognize Israel unless there is an independent Palestinian state. So you can tell that there is a momentum at different levels being built by different key players in the region to come up with some sort of a vision and a plan of what to do. Rob, we have to remind our viewers globally that in the GCC region, there's a huge concern that the moment the Israelis hit Iran, and the Iranians, as they said, they will target anywhere, not necessarily only in Israel, but they said that they are going to hit back at any nation which is going to use its territory or airspace against Iran. That situation they don't want to see, and this explains why today the meeting that is taking place today in Brussels, what we're now going to see is what is happening behind closed doors, which is the need on the details of the ceasefire agreement and the security arrangement, and also the political landscape that could prevail in the region after Gaza, after southern Lebanon, and the implementation of establishment of an independent Palestinian state. And this is the momentum which is prevailing here. We've been talking to senior EU officials about their expectations, and they say they do understand that the Americans, the key player in the region, have all it takes to bring about a solution, but for the time being, they need the GCC as a guarantor to prevent this from further deteriorating.
Hashem, thank you very much indeed. Hashem Ahelbarra there at the meeting in Brussels. Hashem, we're going to be checking in with you as we get closer to whatever statement may be coming out at the end of it. But for now, thanks very much indeed.